Hi everyone! Today I want to share another project with you, and it's going to be created on my serger. I have my serger sitting right back here. Whenever I use my serger, I find that I can do a lot of different creative accents, but I can also get things done fast and easy. So today the project that we're going to do is going to be a fast and easy one using my serger. We're going to use our 4-thread overlock. Now, maybe you have a different machine than mine. If you have a machine that does a 4-thread overlock, you can use that stitch. Or maybe you want to use your 3-thread overlock. That's going to also be a possibility for the technique that I'm going to teach you today. So the project that I'm going to share with you is the one that I have laying out right in front of me. And I'm going to use it for a tablecloth. There's probably many different ideas that you're going to come up with to create something like this and to use it for. Maybe you want to put it on the back of a recliner, the back of a sofa, just to make something a little prettier. Maybe you just want to lay it on the end of a bed. So the technique that I share with you, hopefully you can take that idea to create some of your different ideas and projects a lot easier. So what I've done here is I've picked up a focus fabric. So you'll notice this fabric has some beautiful bright red flowers in it. It has accents of green in it. And when I look at that fabric, that's where all the design started in my mind. I really love those colors. Now help me pick another fabric that's going to coordinate with my focus fabric. Right in the center of this fabric, I see an off-white fabric that just has some little subtle swirls, flourishes in the background. But the background fabric is like an ecru, an off-white. So I just very quickly kind of looked around and found another fabric. And here is my complementary fabric. This is also an ecru fabric, but it does have an embossed pattern of these flowers. Now, that was really easy for me to find because with this fabric line, the second fabric actually is another fabric in the same line. It's really nice today when we go look at different fabrics and fabric lines, there's typically 2, 3, 4, and even more at times of fabrics in that same line that coordinate with each other. So that makes it very easy for us to coordinate and pick fabrics. Now maybe you want a scrappy feel. You could also do this technique with just getting rid of all of those scraps that you have in your fabric closet, right? Or maybe you want a shabby chic feel. So then you can pull all of those fabrics to give you the feel of shabby chic. Or maybe you love 30s reproductions. So whatever fabric that you want to use, whatever feel that you're going for, then just pick those fabrics that make you happy. Maybe you want to do something like this to cover a table for a holiday. So maybe you want to do a Christmas one. The colors that I've chosen here would definitely also go for a Christmas feel. So I could decorate with this tablecloth at Christmas time. Maybe you want to do Easter. Maybe you want to do St. Patrick's Day. You know, there's so many different holidays that we can choose from. This is definitely going to be a technique that you can apply to those different festive holidays. Now let me show you the back of my project. So on the back of the project, you're going to see those serged seams, but it looks very nice and very neat. So if you're a quilter, you've done a lot of piecing, but you go ahead and you quilt it. But with this project, we're just going to do piecing, but we're not going to quilt it because it really does make a beautiful covering. It's lightweight. If you're using it as a tablecloth, then you can grab some of the clear vinyl and lay it on top of your cloth tablecloths. And that way you can wipe it down very easily. So we're going to have a piecing experience with our serger, and the back of our project is going to look nice and neat when we're finished. All right, now I'm going to show you a few other fabrics that I'm going to be serging in my example. So here I've pre-cut a square. This square is 8.5 inches. You don't have to start with my size. You can start with a different square, but I just chose to start with an 8.5 by 8.5. If you want to, for this to be more rectangular, up and down, if you're going to do something like this for the back of a recliner, maybe you might want to start with a rectangle. But I'm starting with an 8.5 inch square. And then I've cut a variety, I've cut strips of 2 coordinating fabric, and these are 4 inches wide just by the width of the fabric. So that means from selvage to selvage. So if you buy your fabric, when you take it home and you open it up, it's going to have a fold along the middle, but when you open it up and you go all the way to one edge and all the way to the other edge where the fabric stops, that's called your selvage. So I've just cut these strips the width of the fabric from one selvage to the other. And then I've chosen 4 coordinating threads. So these are just some Maxi-Lock swirl threads. I love using these swirl threads. I have them pretty much in every color. I have 4 in every color. I love them. Okay, so here we go. We've got 2 of those. And then I went ahead and just grabbed 2 other green threads. This is a paler green, so it's just going to blend in with the background of the fabric. Okay, so now that I've kind of told you a little bit of what we're going to do, let's move on over to the serger and see how this is created. Once again, let me just kind of talk a little bit about our supplies here. The green fabric, I started with my center square, and then the floral fabric is going to be the first fabric that goes around the square. So I end up using less of the red fabric, the floral, so that made me need 1 more strip of that green fabric. So I added a 6th strip, and we have 4 spools of coordinating serger threads, whatever matches your fabric. And then I'm going to use my little iron. I have a little travel iron that I use a lot when I do tutorials or applique. I have my ironing mat, my rotary cutter, my rotary cutting mat, and ruler. We have our center square and our first strip. And the first strip is a full strip. I'm taking it from selvage to selvage. I'm going to place it right sides together. You'll notice how I'm extending the end past the center square, and I'm going to trim my strip a little bit past that center square. And that way you don't have to match up edge to edge when you're serging. You can center the strip. It's going to be longer than you need. And then after that, we're going to trim it up to where it's nice and straight. So here I have it right sides together. We're going to take it over to our serger. My serger is set up for a 4-thread overlock. And I have my serger set up to where my seam is going to be a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. There's a guide on my serger that I like to follow to where when I place my fabric on there, I'm going to be skimming the right edge of the fabric to the left edge of the blade. Now we have a finished seam on that edge. I'm going to take it over to my pressing station and give it a quick press to press that seam in, and then you'll see me press that fabric back. So now that I've pressed the seam flat and pressed it away from the center square, I'm going to trim up each one of those outer edges to have a straight edge from the center square to the floral fabric that we just serged onto our center square. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim it up. Nice straight edge. We'll do that to the opposite side. So I've just rotated it around using the edge of my center square to get nice and straight and line up along the seam that we just serged, and then I'll straighten that up. Alright, so we finished our first edge. Now we're going to take the rest of our strip, because we should have plenty to do the next side, and I'm going to do that same method. Every time I place a strip down, you're going to see me trim the floral strip or whichever strip we're working on past the center area that we're serging it to. So it's going to be longer on the left and longer on the right than the edge that we're serging it to. And once again, that just makes it easier when you're serging it together, that you can trim it up after you're finished and you don't have to worry about matching up that beginning edge to the end edge. So to me, it's working smart and not hard to have your fabric a little bit longer when you line it up, and then you can just trim it all up nice and neat when you get finished. Okay, so now I'm going over a seam. I want to make sure that seam lays nice and neat. as I continue to serge. So anytime I go over a seam, you'll see me just kind of checking it. So now I'm going to set that serge seam in and then flip that strip away from that center square with a press. And now once again, I'm going to go in and trim away that excess fabric. Now we have that edge nice and straight. Now we'll just rotate it around and do that opposite edge. So once you've done a couple of these seams, you're going to get very comfortable and you'll be able to just go, 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 and you'll be so, it's kind of mindless seaming and serging once you get started and you get kind of comfortable with it. So now you'll notice we're just going around in a clockwise motion. So like starting at 12 o'clock, then just coming all the way around and continuing and letting it grow as we continue to piece edge to edge. All right, so now we're just laying that strip down, making sure it's a little bit longer on each side of the edge that we're going to serge it to. There we go. I'm just giving it an extra check, kind of show you. I'm going to just place it again, right sides together, and then serge all the way down. You'll notice there I just kind of opened it up a little bit just to kind of look to make sure I had my edges still nice and straight together. That's always just a good little check to just make sure you're being accurate and you got both of those seams. You wouldn't want your under seam to kind of slip away and then you wouldn't have caught that bottom seam. You just want to make sure you're catching both of those seams. So I set in the seam, I press the strip, the floral strip away, and now I'm going to trim it up. We'll rotate it around and trim up the opposite side. So on this project, I've created those strips quite wide. I did them 4 inches wide. Now look, I'll go back to that little point in a minute. Notice how that strip was just way too short. So that was the end of our first strip, our first 4-inch strip. So now I had to pull from my stack over there and get started on another long strip. Once again, it's got to be longer than the pieces that we're serging it to. So I'm just giving it just kind of a little general look, making sure it's longer and it's wider than that area. Give it a little cut. Again, just place it right sides together. Just kind of letting you look there. So here I have the edge extended out. Have them right sides together and back to our serger to create that seam. Now as I'm coming forward, you're going to notice that I'm going towards a seam that's in the opposite direction of what we're serging. So those are the seams that you just want to make sure that they don't flip back on you. Now the next seam we go over is coming in the same direction that we're serging. So that's going to just easily lay down nice and flat the way we want it to. So we'll serge off just like we've done before. This is our last edge all the way around our center square. All finished. We'll give that seam a press. And I'm just pressing along the other seams also. Pressing just really makes things look professional. And now I'm going to go ahead and press we're going to press that strip away from the center square, and that also positions those serged seams away from the center square too. And I bet you can guess what we're going to do next. Yep, absolutely. We're going to go ahead and we're going to trim up that last strip to where it's in line with that strip underneath it, nice and straight and neat. There we go. And now let's just rotate it around and we'll do the opposite edge. So now we have just a beautiful, straight, perfect square. A very nice beginning to our project. So earlier I was mentioning about my strips being 4 inches. If you wanted to use different widths of strips, you could definitely do that. Maybe you want to do smaller to where it looks a little more pieced, or you can even do them larger depending on maybe you want to finish quicker. So larger, wider strips are going to get you finished a lot quicker. So you can just keep that in mind, whichever ideal or concept fits the project that you want to make. So now we're ready to do our next round. So if you kind of look at the top edge of the flowers, you can kind of see the seam right there at the top. That's the first edge that we placed on our center square. It's kind of camouflaged a little bit. You may not notice it, but that's the edge that we started on. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start a round of my green fabric on that top edge also. We're going to do the same concept. We're going to cut our fabric wider than that top edge that we're serging it upon. Once again, we're going to put it right sides together. And you see that my green fabric has extended longer than my center section that we've already started. Here's another time where you're just watching that seam, so make sure that seam stays flat when it goes underneath the presser foot. Again, that just sets it up to be nice and finished and flat when you press it and it's laying on your table, so you don't have any little unnecessary bumps. Time to press, time to flip, and time to trim. So we're going to go ahead and add another green strip. Just like we did with our floral strip, we're going to continue to add those strips on those outer edges. The next edge as we continue to turn our square clockwise. So from like 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And the main thing is when you get started, just make sure you go in the same direction as you come around the square. For this project, the way I'm doing it. Once again, we're going to place it right sides together and serge all the way down that edge. Now you'll notice that my strips on my side that I'm serging are beginning to get longer and longer. So at some point in the project, it's going to be necessary for you to serge together more than one of your long strips because it's going to need to be longer to get all the way across one edge. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so at this point, I think you're kind of getting the flow of the process. So I'm going to just press this really, really fast. You'll notice how the green's beginning to come around the next round. I'll trim it up, but I'm not going to show you that here. But let's go ahead and talk about joining some strips to create longer strips when it becomes necessary. I'm going to place the strips kind of in a V position, and I'm going to place them right sides together. I'm going to extend the short edge at the top above the strip at the bottom, and the bottom strip on that short edge is going to be extended above the long strip on the top. And that's going to help us be able to line them easier. See where I have my finger? I'm going to go from point to point, and that's where we want to stitch our seam when we bring it over to the serger. And there I'm just kind of showing you the notches on my serger. I know that's where my needle position is that I'm using in my serger, that left needle. So instead of watching my blade, I'm going to be using the notch on my presser foot to guide that notch from corner to corner, because that's where my leftmost needle is going to serge. So I'm just kind of giving it a nice visual, lining it up with the notch on the presser foot, getting it straight, and then I'm just going to look forward to where the intersection of those fabrics are. Remember the point where I took my finger and just ran it from top to bottom? So now I'm just kind of visually watching the notch to line it up to where you have that little intersection of the two fabrics. And when I come off the fabric, I'll go ahead and trim those threads, and let's take a look at it when I open it up. I'm going to give it a press before I open it up. And now when I bring the fabrics apart, you're going to notice that you have that 45-degree seam from edge to edge. Give it another press, and that's going to extend your strips much longer. Maybe you have some shorter pieces that you want to serge together. You can do that also. Just don't use really short strips, because then you're going to see a seam very close together. All right, now look what it's going to look like when we get finished. So I kind of sped up and kind of gave you the a look at what it looks like when we get it all together. But once we finish, now we want to put an edge on the outer area. So it really was fun to just pick two fabrics, and easy to pick two fabrics with this pattern. If you wanted to do it scrappy, you could definitely do it scrappy. All right, so now it's time for us to edge finish those edges. And I'm going to do that with a narrow hem. I'm going to use a decorative thread. So here I have 2 spools of my sulky 12-weight thread. And a 12-weight thread is a heavier weighted thread. And I'm using the swirl thread. That's a green thread that we were using earlier in construction. It's going to go on the needle. You're not really going to see the swirl thread. It's just going to be in the needle. But it's this sulky 12-weight that's really going to create the accent when we do the narrow hem. 12-weight, if you think about threads, the smaller the number, the larger the number, the thinner the thread. So this thread is going to make a beautiful accent. I'm going to line up the right edge of the fabric to where it is going to skim the blade once more. I want it to just sit to the left of that blade. So we're not really cutting anything off. I've threaded up my serger for a 3-thread narrow hem, and I'm using that 12-weight decorative thread in my upper looper and my lower looper, and I have that swirl thread in my needle. And so now I'm just going to serge all the way down one long edge of the tablecloth, and as I get to the other end, I'm going to show you how to turn a corner. And you might want to turn a corner, or you may want to go just straight off. Either one is just fine, but I will show you how to do that. I'm getting to a seam, and I want to show you the seam underneath, and I'm just showing you to make sure you keep your seams going in the direction that they will be able to lay flat. So when we were pressing earlier in the project, just keep it flat. We're getting close to the corner. We're going to go straight to the edge, and we're going to stop about 1 stitch before we get to the end of the fabric. So we're about 1 stitch before we come up. I'm going to raise my presser foot. I just kind of adjusted my needle a little bit. I'm going to tweak the thread towards me, and that's going to allow me to bring the fabric straight back and clear the stitch fingers. And now I'm just pivoting and turning, And I'm going to align the fabric to where when I start serging, I'm about 1 stitch onto the fabric. Just right in that little window on my serger, I can see where my needle is going to go down. If I start about 1 stitch on the fabric and start serging, that's going to give me a beautiful corner. Now, if you don't want to turn the corner, you can definitely just serge off. So there we go. That doesn't look too bad, right? That looks pretty good. So just practice. Corners takes practice on a serger. Again, if you don't want to turn the corner like I just showed you, you definitely can go straight off the edge. Put you a little no fray on those corners, and before you trim the edges, just no fray them or fray block them. I use fray block the most. That's my favorite. So now I'm just going to go ahead and continue forward till I have my decorative edge on all 4 edges of my tablecloth. Right, so we have our edges all finished. These 2 I've already fray blocked and trimmed up. So let me just go ahead and show you this one. Nice and neat. I love the way a narrow hem with decorative thread looks on the edge of fabric. So here I have my little bottle of fray block. And I'm going to place that on the edge of the, I'm going to place it on the edge where the 2 corners meet, where those decorative threads come together on the corner. I just want to get a generous amount of the fray block in that area where I'm going to be clipping. And typically what I do is I let it dry before I trim. But because we're here doing the tutorial, I'm probably going to trim it in front of you before I've ever let it dry. But I always let it dry. That's kind of my best method. And then once it's dry, I go ahead and I clip the tail. Once we've let the fray block dry, we can trim the edge, and that's going to give us a nice secure finish to that edge of that decorative stitch. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. Please click that like button and don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to have my Facebook group, my Instagram, and my YouTube channel noted here at the end. So definitely pop over there, like, join, subscribe, and hopefully I will see you next time on the next tutorial.